First and foremost, everyone, welcome to the Medical Lab Sciences Hawk Talk. We are very excited to welcome you here. Congratulations on your fall 2021 admission to Hunter College. This has been by far one of the more competitive years at Hunter, so congratulations again on your admission and getting through that huge competitive process. A few things to know about today's Hawk Talk is that we are in webinar mode. So while you're not on video or on camera with us, you're not on audio with us, there is a way for you to ask questions. There's a Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions about anything that you hear during your session, make sure you put your questions right in there. We will have a live Q&A section afterwards. So after you hear the presentation, we will ask your questions live. Don't forget that Q&A button during the presentation. Once again, welcome. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it off. They're all yours.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming to hear my little spiel about medical laboratory sciences today. This is a major that, a lot of students are really not that familiar with. Usually students think of biology, chemistry, maybe physics, math, nursing. MLS is a little bit, in a different direction. But you'll see there's quite a bit of overlap between MLS and also biology, if you like biology. So the simplest way to think of MLS, the way I usually describe it to students right off the bat, is to say that MLS, Medical Laboratory Sciences, is sort of a more kind of medical or clinically oriented major compared to a typical biology major. So what do I mean by that? Well, for one thing, if you just look at our curriculum, I didn't bring any slides or anything like that, but I can just mention a few things. You'll see that we have some courses that are kind of what you might find in a biology major. We have courses like immunology, physiology. I teach histology, one of my courses, a study of tissues, sort of a cell biology, tissue biology course. We have a cell and tissue culture course. We teach you how to grow cells and culture, primary cells, cultured cell lines, that sort of thing. You might find those type of courses in a regular biology department. Then we have other types of courses which are certainly more medically oriented, such as a class on hematology, which is study of blood diseases, immunohematology, where you learn how to, it's really sort of a blood transfusion course, learning how to type blood and analyze blood types. It's really a blood banking course. We have a 2-semester clinical biochemistry course and a huge 2-semester clinical microbiology course. Most biology microbiology courses are 1 semester. We have this 1-year-long, pretty intense but fun clinical microbiology course. I think most of our students really love the microbiology the most. So our curriculum is different than a typical biology course. It's slanted towards sort of clinical medical science. And the reason for that is the types of careers that our students can pursue. If let's say you're a biology major, biology majors might want to go to med school, be pre-med, go to med school, PA school, go for a PhD or master's degrees in different areas. I was a biology major 10,000 years ago, and I knew I was going to go for a PhD. Our major, and this is the critical thing, our major allows you to do pretty much virtually everything you could if you had a biology major. Okay, you can go to med school, you can go to PA school, veterinary school, optometry school from MLS, but you have one other pathway that is really at Hunter specific unique to MLS, and that is the opportunity when you graduate to become a clinical laboratory technologist. So, what is a technologist? What is a clinical laboratory technologist? A lot of people are not familiar with that term or that profession. Those are people that actually work in clinical laboratories and they analyze patient samples. Most students are familiar with research laboratories, making discoveries, things like that. The clinical lab is where all patient samples go to be analyzed. So nowadays, right over the last year, with all the COVID testing, that's what a lot of our students, if they've gone in that direction, they can be involved in these clinical labs, which are testing COVID samples. So the clinical labs we find, they're in all the big hospitals have clinical laboratories, full of clinical laboratory technologists. You can find private companies that have their own laboratory facilities and analyze patient samples. So the bottom line is every time you go to a doctor and you give them a sample, some sort of sample, it could be a swab of your throat, a blood sample, a urine sample, a biopsy, all those samples, they go in that little box outside the doctor's office and you wonder where do they go? They go to clinical laboratories to be tested. And it's a shame that a lot of students don't know about working in clinical laboratories because right now there are like gazillions of jobs for technologists. And I sometimes refrain from using the word job because you can turn a job into a lifetime career. Many of our students continue to work in clinical labs for their careers, become managers and so forth. And I should mention, so the clinical lab is sort of broken down into microbiology labs, hematology, blood bank, chemistry labs. There are pathology labs to analyze, like biopsies and things like that. So some students find areas that they like and they pursue those areas of the clinical lab. Now, importantly, to be a clinical laboratory technologist in New York State, you have to have a license. And to get that license, you have to graduate from a New York State licensure qualifying program. MLS at Hunter is a New York State licensure qualifying program. So that means when you graduate from MLS, you have to take a New York State licensure exam. Okay, it's like taking a license exam for being a nurse or a doctor, the boards. So you would graduate from MLS, you would take a licensure exam, get your license, and then you can go out and look for a position in a clinical laboratory. So one of the things that students really like about our major, there are many things, but one of the things is that they don't have to go to graduate school to start a really wonderful, rewarding career where they're helping people, thousands and thousands of people, but they're doing it behind the scenes and they're actually not coming in contact with people, like if you were a nurse. So you're behind the scenes in the lab and you're helping people, and you can make a really terrific career out of being a technologist. You can move up to a lab supervisor and so forth. So some students, we have, I would say about 70% of our students decide to go into the clinical lab. And then the remaining students do other things. Some of them go to med school, physician assistant school, dental school, you name it. We have people interested in optometry and other disciplines. Some want to go into epidemiology, public health. So there are many things you can do with an MLS degree. You can do just about everything you could as a biology major, but you have this option of becoming a clinical laboratory technologist. If you choose a different major, biology, chemistry, and so forth, you wouldn't be able directly to take the licensure exam. Okay, so you would have to go to another program after you graduate from one of those other majors. So once again, one of the great things students love is they can graduate and start a very nice career. Some students make it their whole career. Some students will work for maybe a year or two if they're interested in taking the MCATs or retaking the MCATs. It's okay. They're working, in a nice environment, in a clinical environment. So they're getting good experience working with physicians and analyzing samples. Don't forget, 70% of all diagnoses are based on clinical lab results. So they're getting really good experience. And if they decide to then apply to some sort of graduate program, they'll do that after working for a couple years. In terms of our department, our major, we're relatively small compared to, let's say, biology or chemistry. We have about 120 majors, maybe a couple more than that, but about 120 majors. So we're relatively small. One of the reasons we're small is that all students that come into the major are required to do an 8-week summer internship, 9 to 5, in the summer of their senior year. So we will place you in a clinical laboratory in your senior year over the summer so you can get some real hands-on experience, see if you like working in clinical labs. If you do, that's a great thing to pursue. Very often, the place where you're doing your internship offers jobs to those that they've already sort of partially trained and gotten to know. So that's a great thing about doing an internship. If you're not interested, you don't like the clinical laboratory, you can pursue something else. So that's kind of one of the really important sort of courses, I would put in quotes, this internship that our students take. And we have a number of clinical partners around the city where we send students. A lot of the New York Presbyterian hospitals take our students. Bellevue takes our students. We also have, there are quite a few different hospitals. We also have private laboratories that take our students. Some of our students go to work in the public health labs, which are actually right across the street from our Brookdale campus. They love hiring our students. We can kind of, it's sort of focused on microbiology in the public health labs. You may know that MLS is a little different than most majors. You can't just select MLS as your major. You have to apply, but that shouldn't discourage you from applying. It's not really that big of a deal. You just complete a transfer application, CUNY transfer application to apply. And we only have a couple prerequisites that you'd probably be taking for other majors like biology, just general biology and general chemistry. And most students that really want to get into our major tend to get in. And we may, there may be a reputation for us being competitive. We don't try to be competitive. We just have to kind of regulate the number of our students so that we have enough space, first of all, to teach in our labs, but also we have enough internship sites. So most students, in my experience, that really want to come into MLS end up making it into MLS at some point. And I think those are kind of some of the major points. I don't know if any of you have any questions. I'm happy to answer them.
That was an awesome overview. Thank you so much. A few questions did come in. I think the first question that's important is a lot of you students are very curious about the summer internship that you mentioned, an 8-week internship. Do they get placed? Do they select a site, or how does that work?
Well, those are good questions. So after you've taken 2 semesters worth of MLS courses, the way it usually works, we try to ask students what is their sort of favorite area, clinical laboratory area. And then we have a professional practice coordinator who's one of our faculty members, a professor, and she will do her best to try to place you at a site where you can work in that discipline that you're really interested in. Like if you select microbiology, we try our best to put you in a micro lab. Very often, even when you go to these labs, they rotate you in different areas. Not always, but in many cases, they'll rotate you at least in a few other areas of the clinical lab. We try our best to select places that are convenient for you to get to if we can. But we have limited sites and we do our best to place everyone. This summer, I was just told we're going to have to place 42 students. So if you can imagine trying to find 42 slots in different laboratories, it's a very, very big job. But it's, like I said, 2 months, 9 to 5. So you have to be aware that you really can't work during that time or take summer classes. But students have been doing this for years, since the 1970s, so it's worked out.
Awesome. A question came in that's a little more logistics focused. Students are asking, you mentioned that they can take a licensing exam upon graduation, right? Is it a New York State license? Can there be one that's sort of national level, or how does that work?
So the license that the exam that our students take is a New York State license exam. This exam is actually created by an organization called ASCP. Some of you may be familiar with ASCP. ASCP certifies students for clinical laboratory technology. So there are certain programs where you can go attend what's called a NACLS. We're getting into sort of difficult terminology, but NACLS, accredited programs, which lead to ASCP certification. So those types of programs, when you graduate, you take this ASCP exam, and New York State uses it for licensure. In our case, and I should say in those cases, students get what's called ASCP certification. Our program just leads to New York State licensure. So the big difference between our program and the other programs, besides the ASCP certification, is that we get a lot of students that aren't really sure exactly what they want to do yet in their careers. And we have students that are juniors, they still are not sure what they want to do. If you choose a NACLS accredited program, those programs are really dedicated to just producing clinical laboratory technologists, so that the curriculum is very specialized. And they also have clinical rotations that may go like 10 months of like full-time rotations. We are trying to teach more broadly to students. So we know we're getting students that want to go to med school or PA school or do something else. And so our curriculum, because we're not NACLS accredited, we can teach in a more broad fashion to a kind of a wider population of students. And that's because we're basically about options, career options. We want students to find what it is they like and pursue that. We've had some students that come in thinking they're going to want to do work in the clinical lab, and then they've taken senior seminar course where they have to go in depth in the scientific literature and give various presentations. Some of our students also do research in the laboratory with our faculty, independent study. And I know one student, for example, she thought she was going to the clinical lab, and she decided to go into basic research, go for a PhD, and to study cancer. So people come into our major, some of them know they want to go in the clinical lab, but the vast majority are still not sure. So we teach more broadly than these other programs.
Thank you. A few very interesting questions came in about the student side of things. How is the community among the students?
Well, we give out these questionnaires to students to fill out, to tell us what they think about our major, about our program. And one of the things they usually say, and of course the pandemic has messed all of that up, but is that there's a very sort of family-like quality to our major, because as I said, we're relatively small, about 120 students, and the students tend to go as a cohort because everybody's taking the same classes. Everybody has to take the same classes. And so students go through, semester after semester with each other. They get to know each other. Since we're small, you get to know your faculty members quite well. This is important because when you graduate and you want to get a job in a clinical lab or somewhere else, we know you well enough so that we can write good letters of recommendation for you, or these so-called skills surveys when you apply to hospital laboratories we're filling out all the time. So I think students like it, and we are actually not at the main campus. We're down at the Brookdale campus on 25th Street and First Avenue. That's where I'm sitting right now. And we have our own kind of wing of labs in the east building of Brookdale. So it's like your own little world, basically. It's separated. I always talk about it as being sort of an island in the Galapagos from the Hunter, which is the mainland. So students kind of like it. It's a unique kind of experience.
I think it's worth mentioning to the students who are in the room that the medical lab program, like when you hear 120 students in the program, it's like, oh my God, there's 120 students. But it's actually one of the very, very smallest programs that we have. And because it's a smaller program, you get a little bit more, I want to say, personalized approach, right? The faculty sort of works with the same cohort, every class, you're staking together. I think that adds to the experience. You're sort of a small fish in a big school, right? So you get to experience both sides of the coin. You get to experience the general education requirement classes where you're on main campus for your first 2 years, and then you get experience the small environment of medical lab sciences, which is at Brookdale in a small group with small cohort. I think that's kind of one of the coolest part about it. But you also mentioned something about COVID classes and you're being online. So a lot of our students are asking, what would potential semester look like if we were in a normal semester versus a COVID? How have we adjusted in medical lab sciences?
Sure. So MLS has been one of the few programs at Hunter which have been able to actually continue to offer in-person labs. And of course, right when the pandemic hit, right, and back in the last March, we all moved online. But in the fall, we came back and held our labs in person. We're holding them this semester all in person. I know some other departments have been holding some classes, some labs, maybe half their labs in person, but we're doing all of our labs. We have to do that because we're New York State licensed and students need these hours to meet the New York State requirements. So we have taken precautions down at Brookdale. So this is the other nice thing about being at Brookdale. We're a little bit more isolated. There is a dorm here at Brookdale, but I actually don't even see that many students coming into the dorm. But we, so we have our own labs and we have 4 separate teaching labs, and we've been able to hook them up with video monitors and a sound system. So we've been able to spread out all the students to maintain social distancing. So whereas I used to have, I'm teaching histology this semester, I used to have a whole section in one lab. Now it's split into 2. And everyone is socially distanced. CUNY makes sure everyone's socially distanced. And, masks are required and we wear goggles and that sort of a thing. And our introductions, I will give sort of a presentation in one room with a microphone and the other room will hear me and see me. And then after the introduction and students are doing their activities, the faculty circulate with all the students in person. So it's working out. I was just down there this morning in our immunohematology course. We have 3 labs and it's like a hospital, actually, a hospital laboratory. We were all joking with students in 3 laboratories. We're all, we have faculty watching, overseeing everyone. And it was quite an unusual experience to see that.
Sounds like you're getting your steps in between all the labs, huh?
Yeah, I do labs all for hours.
There's a health benefit to that, even if mine knew it, but there's definitely a health benefit.
True.
A few other students are asking about sort of how does somebody utilize this MLS degree further in life if they want to go into like a pre-health side of things. You mentioned pre-med. Is it hard to manage a pre-med course track with MLS?
So we have quite a few pre-med students, and you can always talk to the pre-health office, about this. So I didn't want to get into the granular parts of our curriculum, but we only require, for example, 1 semester of organic chemistry, 1 semester of physics. If you decide to go to medical school, you'd have to take the 2nd semester of organic, the 2nd semester of physics, things like that. So you would probably have to fit in taking some extra courses. But our program, and I've been told this by a number of our graduates who've gone on to medical school and like dental school, it has been excellent preparation for their medical degrees when they get to medical school or dental school. I had one fellow who got into Columbia Dental, I think it was Columbia Dental School, and he said that he felt like he was really prepared when you had that first year of heavy duty kind of medical courses, because he already knew micro, the basics of micro, the basics of hematology, et cetera. So it's very good preparation. And we've had quite a few students go on to med school and other types of medical careers. We've even had students go into nursing. So it's very interesting to see.
I think for those students who may be in the room who haven't heard of our pre-professional tracks, Hunter has what we call a pre-professional advising office, and that is pre-health, so pre-med, pre-vet, pre-dental. There's also a pre-law suite, there's a pre-business suite in there. So think of it as a pre-next big thing you want to do after Hunter. That's a group of advisors that are going to help you ensure that whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish happens for you at Hunter. So for example, if you decide to study MLS, you can still be part of the MLS program. The pre-health advisors are the ones that will make sure that you take those 2nd semester courses that are required for medical school that may not be part of the MLS program. So you can still study MLS and be on the pre-med track, even though the classes may not necessarily in MLS program just alone get you to that med school requirements. And I think that's also a cool thing to know about. And I put the link for pre-health program and MLS program right in the chat for you guys if you want to check that out.
Can I make one other point about this? I didn't interrupt you. I'm sorry.
No, go for it.
One thing that students like about MLS is that some of them come in thinking, I'm going to go to med school. Then they go through MLS, they change their mind. I mean, that's how it is whenever you experience new things that you weren't even aware of, opportunities. Like I said, most students at Hunter don't even know what the clinical laboratory is. Everybody thinks of a research laboratory. So you may start at with one idea, one goal. It may change. Some students plan to go to med school. They may take their MCATs. They may feel they're not competitive. And what they like about MLS is they can actually start working still after graduating, let's say in a hospital, and they can continue to study, get, shadow physician, not, necessarily through the hospital where they're working, but give them time to continue to improve their record, improve their MCAT score, something like that, while they're still working. So it provides a nice level of flexibility. It's also a nice fallback should you not get into med school, something like that, or you change your mind, which is what a lot of people may do.
A question just came in about something that you mentioned, that there is a difference between a clinical lab and a research lab. Can you talk a little bit about that difference?
Sure. Well, a research lab, which is what I kind of grew up doing, a research scientist, you're basically, trying to make discoveries and add, to the scientific literature. So you do research at the bench, you publish your articles, you get grants, that sort of a thing. And, you write papers that end up in the scientific literature. A clinical laboratory is really designed around analyzing patient samples. Now, there is some clinical research that may go on, and some of our students that have ended up working at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, they've gotten involved in clinical trials, for example, when they're testing out new techniques of treatment and so forth, and analyzing various reagents for different types of tests. But the clinical lab is really designed to analyzing patient samples. And you can just think about when you go to the doctor, they take your blood. That blood goes to a clinical lab, and the technologists there analyze different aspects of the blood, and they report those numbers back to the physician. And really greatly, based on the lab results, the doctor really gets kind of an overview of your health. So clinical lab is analyzing patient samples, and a research lab is, making discoveries, essentially. That's simply put.
Makes sense. Students are asking, if you, let's say, come up and you try out the labs and you're not necessarily a fan of being in a setting, sort of in a hospital lab or a clinical lab,
Yeah.
is there a variety of options afterwards for them to go and try?
Well, this is the nice thing. If you decide not to, no one's going to hold a gun to your head and say, you got to go to a clinical lab just because you graduated from MLS. Some students graduate and really never go into the clinical lab. They do other things. We've even had some students, go to law school or go for MBAs and things like that. So you basically have all the options that you would if you were a biology major, for example. It's just you have this extra option if you want to go into the clinical lab. If you don't want to go into the clinical lab, you still have everything that you could have done with a biology degree. So that's the best way that I can put it.
Makes total sense. And I think this question is pretty good too. Somebody's already looking ahead and they've done a little bit of research and they saw that we offer an advanced certificate master's thing in MLS. Students are asking, is it an automatic once you're in BS, in the BS program to go into that, or what is that all about?
So we used to offer a Bachelor of Science, Master's in Biotechnology program. Unfortunately, we had to terminate that because of technicalities with the whole licensure thing didn't work with the masters. Now we have that would be applicable to students going through our program and getting a bachelor's. We have a master's in biomedical laboratory management, which many of our graduates, the students that had graduated from our undergraduate program, have come back. You have to work in a laboratory setting for at least a year to be eligible for our master's in biomedical laboratory management. And this is a program it's very, very interesting. Half of it's science that we teach, emerging technologies in the laboratory, emerging diseases, a biohazards course, risk management. And the other half are sort of management courses that you take in the CUNY School of Professional Studies. So our master's in biomedical laboratory management, which we abbreviate BLM, basically will kind of update you on how to become a lab manager. That's the whole point of it. Help you become a lab manager, work your way up, let's say from a technologist to a supervisor, to a manager. You can make more money, you have more responsibility, and you also learn management skills. So the SPS component gives you also a certificate in management, which is kind of nice. So you not only get the master's, but you get this certificate. And many of our students that have gone through this master's have gotten promoted to senior levels in their wherever they are working. Now, we also take people that work in Museum of Natural History that work in labs. So it's not just clinical labs, it's also research labs as well. We also have, and this is also very interesting, an advanced certificate in cytotechnology. We're going to be converting that into a master's degree, we hope, in the next couple of years. That's a program that we carry out in collaboration with Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. They had for many years, 50 years, a cytotechnology program. Cytotechnologists are specially trained lab technologists who look at patient samples, essentially biopsies, but different types of biopsies taken from all different parts of the body. So if someone has, let's say, a tumor, and a doctor takes some cells out of that tumor and they want to analyze what type of cancer that person has, or a pap smear, for example, if you're familiar with pap smears, these cells then are analyzed by cytotechnologists under a microscope. And these cytotechnologists work with pathologists. Pathologists are medical doctors, MDs. And so the cytotechs work hand in hand with the pathologists, coming up with a diagnosis, let's say, of the type of cancer that a patient may have. So our AC in cytotechnology is a 1-year program, very intense. And then you go out and you work in a cytology department where you, once again, you're helping lots and lots of people behind the scenes. It's a higher paying profession because it's very specialized and you need this extra training.
That sounds awesome. Thank you so much. That pretty much wraps up the questions that we've gotten for students. Do you have any last minute thoughts or advice that you have for students who may be interested in pursuing MLS?
Well, I would say if you have any, some questions, you're welcome to email me anytime. I try to get back to students. I'm emailing students around the clock, it seems, from all over the world. So, my email's on our website. You can find my email, and don't hesitate to ask questions. That's the best way, to learn if you want to come into MLS and what it takes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us and for presenting to our students. To the students in the room, once again, congratulations. We're very excited to welcome you in our fall 2021 class. There are a few things that I want to tell you before we leave. One is if you're interested in learning more about Hunter. So not just about MLS program, but other Hawk Talks. We have about 50 other left. They're about different majors, different programs, the pre-health track, the pre-business tracks, the housing, student life, whatever it may be that you may be interested, could be part of our Hawk Talks. I just put a link in the chat. Please go ahead and check them out. You can attend 1, 2, or as many as you want. I would love to see you at all of them if you're willing. Join me. One last thing to remember, if what you heard today is interesting, and if you're interested in talking to students in the program, we have what we call our Unibuddy platform. And again, if you go to that same link that's in the chat right now, there's a little box that says chat with students, and that can take you to the students who are in the program. If you have questions about the program itself, or perhaps you have questions about living on campus, commuting to Hunter, I don't know, best bagel around Hunter's campus, or how the Brookdale campus may be like, anything that strikes you as something that may be interesting to ask a current student, you can reach out to them directly. Again, all you have to do is just click on the chat with students option. And last but not least, if what you heard today is definitely sort of up your alley, don't forget the deadline to commit to Hunter is May 1st. So you want to make sure that by May 1st, you're going to CUNY first and you accept our offer of admission to reserve your seat in our fall class. Once again, welcome. Congratulations on your acceptance. Thank you so much, Professor Einberg, for being here. Really excited that you got to meet some of our Hunter Hawks for the fall semester. You guys, everyone, have a great weekend. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye-bye.